Baron von Goethen, you must have misheard, for I have sworn that I would never repeat any of this in front of any credible witness, and so therefore you cannot heard of this story. But as you have already seemed to be knowing, I'm sure I can repeat what I know. It was when I was still very young, when I was a lowly priest in Barcelona, and at the time the Spain was at war with Indonesia, and still I was so famed for my forgiveness that the Tsar of Indonesia himself, enclosed in the rags of a beggar, came to my door and asked that I will grant him absolution after giving confession. But his ploy to fool his pursuers had not worked, and so the people following him came to my church as well, and they wanted to kill him. But I did not agree, for he was a sinner who wanted my forgiveness. And so I pointed them at a group of nuns I saw, for they were without sin, and therefore would go straight to heaven. And so they had their way, and had their killing, and I had my sinner. And after many an hour of giving confession to the Tsar of Indonesia, I finally could grant him absolution from his most terrible deeds. And when I had done so, he was so glad that he spoke of nothing else. And so, as he went back to his home, he spoke to everyone about my forgiveness. And so it came that even the devil heard of my talents to bring people back into heaven. And so it came that a long stream of pilgrims formed before my church, and I heard confession after confession. And then there entered one, my church and my confessional, whom I did not know. And he spoke, and spoke, and spoke. And after his confession had lasted 3 days, I bade of him a few hours of rest to change my clothes and eat. And he said that he agreed and would return. And so did I. And so the confession went on for 3 months and 33 days. But then I could do this no longer, and I am ashamed to say that I fled. So great was my dread at my task, so fearful was I, so weary, that I could walk the waters of the ocean. So fast did I run, and when I finally arrived in South America, there he was already waiting, and bade me enter a confessional. And the next day I again fled. This time I tried something else, and I grabbed one of the giant leaves that you will find on the banks of the Amazonas. And I jumped off a mountain and let myself be carried around by the wind. And when I arrived in Australia, there amongst the criminals, I thought I was safe, for he would not find someone as pious as me amongst these black sheep. But again the devil was waiting, and again he bade me to a confessional. And this time I thought if I could dig myself into the depths of the hell itself, he would not find me. And finally, when I dug myself and through the earth, and something opened before me, I was standing in Rome. And as I was in front of the gate to the Vatican, he was waiting for me. And so I gave confession to the devil in the Vatican. And being as frightened and fearful as I was, and without hope, I went to the Pope, and I asked him what I should do. As it would have it, the Pope at that time did not live in the Vatican, for he was pious and did not need the riches of the Vatican. If he could have his bed made by maids of a farmer. And so he bade me to the farmer's desk, and there we drank. And as we drank, we labored on over what I should do, and how I could forestall my grim fate to hear forever the confession of the devil. And as the evening moved on, the Pope, for he was not only pious but wise, he found a solution, and it was most simple. And he said, Aren't you and your wife the same before God? And I said, Yes, surely, but I am not married, for I am a priest. And I am the Pope, he spoke, and I can marry anyone, even a man who is a priest. And so he was correct. But I told him, if I will let my wife take the confession, how can I trust that she will keep the secret of the confessional? And he said, Because we will not take a woman, for they have a far too loose tongue. I will show you whom I will marry you to. And then we went into the stables, and he showed me. There was standing a sheep, as white as the moon is black. And he spoke unto me, and said, This shall be your wife, for she will never talk of the secrets conveyed by the devil. And he was right, for she would not speak. And so that very night I had to be married to a sheep. I will not speak of the night of the marriage, for it is sacred. And in the next day, when the devil came for me to take his confession, I brought the sheep, which was now my wife, back to the confessional, but he would not accept her, for she was not a priest. And he was right. It was not in her standing to take confession, And so, after another day, I went back to the farmer's house to find the Pope drinking with the farmer's daughters, and I asked him, "What can we do, for he will not accept my wife in the confessional?" And we again drank many an hour. And finally, again, wise, he came to a solution, and proposed that we shall make the sheep a shepherd, make her a priest, so that she might read confessions. For he was the Pope, and it was his duty. And so, that very night, my wife became a priest. And as it is unholy for priests to share the bed, the farmer's daughter came to me and showed me what you can do if you're not married. And I spoke hallelujah. And in the next day, rested and assured to have found a way out, I returned to the confessional, the devil waiting for me. And he did accept my wife to take his confession. And after he did so, he said he was finished, and he vanished, cackling in a whiff of odor. And finally the Pope and I had realized that we had been led around by the nose, and he was so ashamed that he granted me the right to dissolve the marriage, and so I did. But as I also was a priest who was allowed to marry, so did I marry the farmer's daughter, until her voice grew loud and shrill, and I dissolved the marriage. And so it went on. And for my silence and the vigor with which I kept the secrets of the confession of the devil, the Pope made me Cardinal of Madrid. For he said, wise again, the people of Madrid are so pious, they don't need a shepherd, and so therefore you are free. And I roamed the earth from end to end, even though the Pope's men keep following me, to make my burden easier, and offer to cut out my tongue. But every time they offer, I slip away in the night, for what is strength of will if there is no temptation? And therefore I shall marry tomorrow again. And of course you are all welcome. But now, Sir Reginald of Salisbury, I heard, whilst the Chinese were invading Belgium, that you did barter a peace between cats and dogs. How can this be? O great protector of Her Majesty's bedrooms. I'm very interested to hear.